Have you ever been laughed at for telling the truth just because you didn't look like someone who belonged? 16-year-old Amara Blake didn't expect her weekend to end in handcuffs and humiliation. She had woken up that Saturday with one thing on her mind: finish the parts list for her advanced science project on solar energy conversion. The Westgate Mall's electronics store had what she needed: conductive wiring, thermal converters, and a specific microcontroller unit that only Electrolux carried. She wore her usual comfort gear: NASA t-shirt, blue sneakers, and her natural curls tied into a puff. A proud STEM girl, Amara always carried herself like she belonged in every room, no matter how many times the world suggested otherwise. What she didn't carry was fear. Not yet. She didn't know a storm of prejudice was waiting just beyond the phone accessories aisle. And here's where I pause as the narrator. Because if you think Amara's story is about a misunderstanding that got smoothed over, you're in for a wake-up call. As Amara studied the shelf with voltage regulators, a store clerk hovered nearby. Too close. A white man in his late 50s with wire-rimmed glasses, thinning hair, and the type of customer service frown that said, "I'd rather not." He was watching her like she had a ski mask on. "Can I help you with something?" he asked for the third time. "I'm good, sir," Amara replied, polite but firm. "Just checking off components for my AP science project." She even showed him her list, typed, highlighted, annotated. He barely glanced at it. And then came the scream. "My phone! Someone took my iPhone!" A woman in designer clothes, high heels clicking against the tile floor, spun around dramatically. Blonde bob, loud voice, expensive manicure. The stereotype that always gets heard first. "It was that girl!" she shouted, pointing directly at Amara. "She was near me the whole time. I saw her." The store manager, who had barely acknowledged Amara earlier, rushed over, full of fake urgency. Within seconds, two mall security guards stomped in like they'd been waiting for something to happen. "Let's go, young lady," one of them said, gripping Amara's arm without asking. "I didn't take anything," Amara protested. "Check my bag, check the footage. I'm here for my science project." They didn't listen. Nobody did. Not the manager, not the screaming woman, not the guards. And that's the first lesson people like Amara learn. Innocence means nothing when they've already decided you look guilty. They marched her through the mall like a trophy. People stared. Kids whispered. Phones came out, recording her, not the woman who lied. Inside the mall's gray, windowless security office, the air was heavy with fluorescent lights and unspoken bias. Then came Officer Rick Donovan. A 20-year veteran of the police department, Officer Donovan walked in like he'd seen it all and dismissed most of it. He wore his badge like a shield and his smirk like a warning. "What do we have here?" he asked, not looking at Amara, but at the white store manager. "Caught red-handed, sir," the manager said. "She fits the profile." Profile. That word. Amara tried again. "Sir, please, I'm a student at Trinity High. I'm in the AP STEM program. I have no record and I came here for—" Yeah, Officer Donovan interrupted. "You all say that." He dumped her backpack onto the table. Wires, notebooks, ID badge. Nothing remotely resembling a phone. Still, he handcuffed her. "You're detaining a straight-A student with no evidence," Amara said quietly. "You're going to regret this." "Oh, really?" Officer Donovan sneered. "What's your mom gonna do? Write a letter to the editor?" Amara looked him dead in the eye. "She's not a writer," she said calmly. "She's Colonel Veronica Blake, Special Forces, Pentagon clearance, and she'll be here soon." That's when the room burst out laughing. The cop, the store manager, even the woman who'd falsely accused her. "A colonel?" Donovan chuckled. "Yeah, and my dog's a Navy SEAL." Here's the thing. People like Donovan don't laugh because something's funny. They laugh to cover fear. Fear that the world might not revolve around their assumptions forever. With wrists already bleeding from the cuffs, Amara lifted her chin. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply said, "Make the call. You'll wish you hadn't waited." And miles away, in a secure military briefing room, a phone buzzed on the desk of Colonel Veronica Blake, a woman who had jumped out of planes, survived sniper fire, and led classified rescue missions. But when she saw her daughter's name flash on the screen, everything else stopped. What would you do if your child called, handcuffed, crying, and accused of theft for shopping while black? Colonel Blake didn't wait for permission. She didn't ask for clearance. She stood up, dismissed herself from the Joint Command meeting, and walked out with the calm urgency of a soldier headed for war. And the mall security office had no idea what kind of reckoning was headed their way. Have you ever walked into a room and known, instantly, that everyone inside was about to learn a lesson they'd never forget? Colonel Veronica Blake didn't wear a uniform that morning. She didn't need one. She didn't need her rows of ribbons, her citations, or even the weapons she kept locked in a cabinet at home. All she needed was her name. And when you've earned respect in war zones, commanded teams who'd fought in places the news still can't talk about, you carry something more dangerous than a weapon into every room. You carry certainty. It had been exactly 32 minutes since Amara called. That was all the time Colonel Blake needed. She'd left the Pentagon briefing room mid-sentence. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs had barely nodded in response. He knew better than to question Veronica Blake when she said, "Family emergency." In the car, her thoughts were razor sharp. Not chaotic, not panicked, just focused. She'd run operations in the Middle East, Africa, even covert missions on Allied soil. But this was personal. And if there's one thing more terrifying than a mother on a mission, it's a mother trained by special forces who knows exactly how systems work and exactly how to dismantle them. She made 5 calls during the drive. First to Major Eileen Cho, her trusted ally in the JAG Corps. Second, to Captain Rios, her contact in military police internal affairs. Third, to the Office of Military Dependence Advocacy, where she had helped draft the very protocol that was now being violated. Fourth, to the Pentagon Civil Rights Liaison, triggering something most civilians don't even know exists, a federal dependent crisis code. And fifth, to her daughter's school principal, Mr. Carter, just to make sure someone in that building had eyes on the kind of student Amara had always been. By the time she reached the Westgate Mall, a network of power was already quietly shifting in her direction. But she didn't walk in with an army. She didn't come surrounded by soldiers or TV cameras. That would have been too easy. She walked in alone, civilian clothes, a black blazer over a crimson blouse. Her long strides across the marble floor were neither rushed nor casual. They were surgical. Security guards at the entrance straightened without realizing why. Customers looked up instinctively, their conversations halting mid-sentence. Veronica didn't look angry. She looked inevitable. She walked past pretzel stands and kids with balloon animals, past mannequins and window displays, past the store where Amara had been accused, where the clerk who had started it all was now pretending to tidy shelves, his hands shaking. She didn't even glance at him, because she was headed somewhere far more important, the security office, where her daughter was still bleeding. The door was guarded by 2 mall officers, both tensed as she approached. "Excuse me, ma'am, this is a restricted move," she said. Not loud, not rude, just undeniable. The man stepped aside without even realizing he'd done it, and Veronica pushed the door open. Time froze. Inside, Officer Rick Donovan was mid-sentence. He turned, saw her, and immediately put on his public face. "You know the one, the 'let me patronize you while I size you up' face. 'Can I help you, ma'am?' he said with mock authority, glancing down at his clipboard like she was just another complaint to log. Veronica didn't look at him. She looked at Amara, sitting in a plastic chair, wrists cuffed, blood visible. Their eyes met. That one moment said everything. Amara didn't cry, didn't yell. She just breathed. Relief, strength. That 1 second, the quiet knowledge that Mom was here now, was enough to make her spine straighten. Veronica turned to the officer. "I'm Veronica Blake," she said. "Amara's mother. Colonel, U.S. Army. Delta." She pulled a card from her wallet and placed it gently on the desk in front of him. It wasn't her ID. It was her Pentagon clearance card. And the color drained from Donovan's face like someone had pulled the plug on his confidence. "People like you," he had said. But now he was realizing exactly who people like her really were. "You will uncuff my daughter," Veronica said softly. "And if I don't?" Donovan asked, trying to regain control of the moment. Veronica took a slow step forward. You already did something unlawful by detaining a minor without proper cause. Then you added excessive force. You've denied her medical care, failed to follow due process, and refused to check security footage. Her voice was calm, clinical, the same tone she used to brief four-star generals on infiltration protocols. Add obstruction of evidence, civil rights violations, and endangerment of a military dependent, and you're looking at federal-level consequences you don't even begin to understand. Officer Donovan blinked. I was just following procedure. Which one? Veronica asked. Because I've read the Atlanta PD protocols cover to cover. There's no clause that authorizes detaining a 4.0 student for shopping while black. Here's what I want every viewer to hear right now. If Veronica hadn't been who she was, would anyone have listened to Amara? That's the question that breaks my heart every time I replay this story. Colonel Blake stepped beside her daughter and examined her wrists. The cuts were deeper than she expected. Her jaw tightened, but her hands remained gentle. Amara, she said, has your property been searched? Yes. Did they find anything? Nothing. Veronica turned back to the room. The store manager, the mall security, even the woman who had made the false accusation, Karen Whitaker, standing smug in the corner, were all watching, waiting. Let's check the footage, Veronica said. The security chief stammered. We haven't had a chance to. Veronica raised her phone, pressed a number. Captain Rios, she said, we're ready for the footage. Send it now. Seconds later, the monitor on the wall flickered to life. Multiple camera angles loaded. The room went silent. They watched Karen Whitaker deliberately place her phone in her own bag, 5 minutes before she began screaming that it was stolen. Watched her glance around. Watched her walk directly toward Amara, ignoring a white teen standing closer to the phone counter, and make her accusation. No editing, no ambiguity, just truth. And suddenly, everyone in that room had a problem. A big one. Karen's eyes widened. That can't be. I must have forgotten. Veronica turned toward her. You falsely accused my daughter, she said. You racially profiled a minor. You weaponized your voice and your privilege, and now you're going to face real consequences. Karen began to stammer again, but Veronica wasn't looking at her anymore. She turned to the store manager. To be clear, you escalated without checking any facts, without evidence, without even looking at my daughter's ID. What was it? Her skin, her hair, her t-shirt. The manager tried to sputter an excuse, but Veronica's tone sliced through it like a knife. And you, she said, facing Officer Donovan, let me be very clear. This is not over. Right then, the door opened again. Major Eileen Cho, JAG Corps, entered with a briefcase full of legal documents in a digital folder, ready to file a formal complaint with the Department of Justice. Then came Captain Rios, MP, who began photographing Amara's wrists and collecting statements. And finally, Chief Harmon, the Atlanta PD commander, whose face turned stormy when he saw what his officer had done. Within 5 minutes, Officer Donovan was relieved of duty, pending investigation. Karen was being escorted out for questioning. And Amara? She stood up, shoulders squared, eyes dry, still in her NASA shirt, still the brilliant girl she had been before the world tried to crush her dignity. What started as humiliation had turned into something much more powerful. A reckoning. If you knew the truth was caught on camera, but someone tried to erase it, would you walk away or fight back? While most of the mall returned to its weekend buzz, children in food courts, teens taking selfies, parents juggling shopping bags, in a corner office just off the main corridor, a war for justice had begun. Amara sat quietly as Captain Rios applied medical ointment to the raw gashes around her wrists, the skin still red and irritated from the excessive tightness of the cuffs. Major Cho stood nearby, compiling witness statements. Officer Rick Donovan had been escorted out in silence. His gun and badge surrendered. Karen Whitaker had gone from smug accuser to stuttering suspect. But Veronica Blake, she wasn't finished. In most stories, this is where the credits would roll. The hero shows up, the truth is revealed, the villains walk out embarrassed. But the real world isn't that clean. Because when power is threatened, it doesn't retreat. It scrambles to cover its tracks. Captain, Veronica said, watching the security monitor, when was the last time your system ran a backup? Yesterday evening, replied Dennis Parker, the mall's head of security, nervously adjusting his tie. We do daily backups around 10 p.m. And what happens if someone tries to delete today's footage before that? She asked, eyes narrowing. Parker hesitated. If the footage is erased before the automatic backup, it's gone. Major Cho leaned forward. What if someone tries to wipe it now? As if summoned by foreshadowing, a red light began blinking in the corner of the monitor. A message appeared. Sectors 3 to 7, video not found? Veronica's voice dropped, cold and sharp. Who's accessing your footage right now? Parker turned white. Before he could answer, the live feed from Electrolux, the electronics store where it all began, switched to static. Cameras 3, 4, and 5, disabled. Another screen showed the store manager, Garrett Miles, hurriedly tapping at a computer terminal in the back office of the store. His face sweaty, his eyes darting. He's deleting it, Parker whispered. Not anymore, Captain Rios said. She tapped her comms unit and radioed in. Code red. Secure and freeze all digital systems at Electrolux. Subject, Garrett Miles. Suspected evidence tampering in an ongoing federal case. Within 90 seconds, mall security swarmed the store. Garrett looked up just as two officers burst through the door. Step away from the keyboard. It's a misunderstanding, he shouted, hands in the air. You're about to misunderstand the inside of a holding cell, one of the guards muttered. Let's stop for a second and talk about what just happened here. Because this moment matters. A man in power tried to erase the truth to protect his image. But truth, when backed by courage and evidence, fights back harder. Inside the security office, Veronica stood motionless. Her mind, trained by decades of tactical response, processed it all like battlefield intelligence. Major Cho, she said, how admissible is this footage tampering? Solid federal crime, Cho replied. Tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice, destruction of digital records, add discrimination, and we've got a pattern. Veronica nodded. Let's prove it's not isolated. She turned to Parker. I want a full pull of all surveillance footage from the past year in Electrolux. Every incident involving minority customers. I also want employee access logs, complaint records, and incident reports. Parker looked unsure. That's a lot, and some of that is proprietary. It's public now, Cho cut in. When you detain a military dependent and falsely accuse her without cause, your right to hide behind corporate policy dissolves. Parker sighed and began typing. Within minutes, the data was flooding in. It didn't take long to spot the pattern. In the last 14 months, Electrolux had detained 9 Black or Hispanic customers on suspicion of theft. In all 9 cases, no stolen items were ever found. No arrests were made. No formal charges. But security logs showed that customers like Amara had been followed, monitored, and in 2 instances, detained just like her. It wasn't profiling by chance. It was profiling by policy. I want all of this copied to 2 encrypted drives, Veronica said, one for military command and one for the DOJ Civil Rights Division. As Captain Rios began copying the files, Major Cho stepped outside to answer a call. When she returned, her expression was grim. We've got another problem, she said. Veronica raised an eyebrow. Media, Cho said. It's already out. She turned the monitor toward the group. On screen, a local news segment was airing footage, taken from a bystander's phone, of Amara being marched through the mall in handcuffs. The voiceover was chilling. Shocking footage has emerged of a teenage girl, reportedly an honor student, being detained and handcuffed at Westgate Mall in what some are calling a clear case of racial profiling. More clips appeared. Social media posts, tweets with the hashtag #Justice for Amara, Instagram stories showing Amara's wrists, the blood seeping beneath the cuffs, Facebook videos from angry witnesses calling out the mall's handling of the incident. It had gone viral. Parker groaned. We're going to be trending. You're already trending, Captain Rios replied, and not in the way you want. And this is where stories start to shift. When silence gets replaced by attention, when the hidden becomes undeniable. Veronica turned to her daughter. You okay? Amara nodded, her eyes alert despite everything. I'm more than okay, she said. I'm ready. Veronica's mouth twitched, just barely. "That's my girl." Then her phone buzzed. She picked it up. "Colonel Blake," a voice said. "This is Director Jennings from the Office of Military Civilian Affairs. We've been briefed. We're activating formal review. You are authorized to proceed with full command support." That was the green light. From that moment on, Veronica was no longer a concerned mother. She was a military officer on authorized civilian intervention. Back at the Electrolux store, a deeper scandal began to unfold. Brad Reynolds, the younger security guard who had quietly stood by during Amara's detainment, approached Major Cho, hesitant. "I have something," he said. "You need to see it." He held up his phone. On the screen, a recorded staff meeting from 2 weeks ago. The manager, Garrett, was speaking. "Look, I don't care what the law says. If someone comes in wearing baggy clothes and talking like a rapper, keep eyes on them. These urban kids come in here and act like they belong. They don't." Everyone in the room went still. Captain Rios took the phone, mouth tight. "And you recorded this?" Brad nodded. "I didn't know what to do with it, but after what I saw today, I can't stay silent anymore." Veronica looked at him carefully. "You just did the right thing," she said. "A little late, but it counts." Brad swallowed hard. "I want to testify," he said. 3 days ago, I walked into a store looking for a charger. I walked out in handcuffs, not because I did anything wrong, but because I looked like someone who might. I was followed, accused, and manhandled. For existing, for breathing, for shopping. A few reporters shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Amara didn't flinch. "I've had to live with this skin my whole life. I've been taught by my mother to stand tall in it. But what they did that day wasn't just about me. It was about every kid like me. Every girl who gets asked if she belongs in the science club. Every boy who gets told he's too aggressive when he's just passionate. Every kid who lowers their voice to sound less threatening. We're tired. I'm tired." She leaned forward slightly, her voice unwavering. "They tried to silence me. They tried to erase me. But I'm still here, and I'm speaking louder than ever. What happened next could not have been staged." A child in the audience clapped. Then 2 more, then a row, and then like a tidal wave, the auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. Some stood, many cried. Cameras flashed not out of obligation, but because they knew they were capturing something historic, something unforgettable. That wasn't just a press conference. That was a reckoning. The Department of Justice confirmed that very night that an official civil rights investigation had been launched into Electrolux and its parent company. The mall issued a formal apology and announced that all security personnel would undergo mandatory racial bias training. Brad Reynolds, the young whistleblower, received a dozen job offers from tech companies and security firms, but he turned them all down. Weeks later, in a quiet diner just outside the city, Brad sat across from Colonel Blake. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked, watching him closely. He nodded without hesitation. "I want to serve where I can protect people the right way, where truth matters more than power." She slid a sealed envelope across the table. Inside was an offer from the United States Army Military Police School. He opened it slowly, his eyes wide. There was also a handwritten recommendation letter signed by Colonel Blake herself. That's how things change. Not with viral videos, not with hashtags, but with people who choose to do the right thing after the cameras go away. As for Karen Whitaker, the store employee who had called security on Amara, she issued a written statement online. It included the words "deeply sorry" and "poor judgment." But it was carefully worded, as if written by a lawyer, not a remorseful heart. Amara never responded. She didn't need to. The truth had already outrun the lie. Officer Rick Donovan wasn't so lucky. After Internal Affairs completed their investigation, they found not only excessive force, but prior complaints from multiple minority shoppers at different locations. He was dismissed from the force without benefits. As part of his final hearing, he was ordered to sit through the full 48-minute security recording from Electrolux. No fast-forwarding, no interruptions, just silence and shame. Meanwhile, Amara was invited to speak at her school's graduation. The same school that had never recognized her robotics achievements before. The same school that had only ever called her out when she was too quiet or too assertive or too black. But this time, she had the mic. She stood on that stage, not in a cap and gown, but in the same blazer she wore at the press conference. She spoke without notes, just like before. If you've ever been told you don't belong, if you've ever been watched like a suspect before you even speak, know this. You are not invisible. You are undeniable. And one day they will remember your name, not because you demanded their attention, but because you earned it with grace, grit, and the truth. People didn't just cheer, they wept, because they weren't just hearing Amara's words. They were hearing their own stories finally being spoken out loud. In the following months, Amara didn't disappear from the spotlight, but she didn't chase it either. She started volunteering at a local community center where she mentored girls in coding and public speaking. Every Thursday, she taught a class titled Voice and Vision, designed to help young Black and brown girls find confidence in their intellect and their identity. Each class began the same way. On the whiteboard, she would write one sentence. They tried to silence me. And then, just beneath it, in bold letters, but I spoke louder. That's the legacy she chose to build. Not one of revenge, not of resentment, but of reclamation. Because when the world tries to erase you, the greatest rebellion is to keep showing up, keep speaking up, and keep lifting others with you. Amara wasn't a symbol. She wasn't a movement. She was a girl who believed that her voice had value, even when others didn't. And in doing so, she reminded an entire generation that courage doesn't always come in loud marches or angry outbursts. Sometimes it comes quietly from a 16-year-old girl who stands up when it's hardest. That, to me, is the definition of power. It had been 6 months since the world first heard the name Amara Blake. 6 months since that moment under the fluorescent lights of Electrolux, where a girl in a hoodie holding a power bank had been handcuffed for no other reason than being present and Black. And now the world had changed, not because time passed, but because people finally chose to care. But for Amara, change wasn't a moment. It was a mission. On a crisp November morning, as red and gold leaves danced across the sidewalks, Amara stood at the entrance of the Capitol building. She had been invited to speak before the House Committee on Youth and Civil Rights, the same halls where policies were drafted and lives were shaped. The irony was staggering. A girl they tried to erase now held a seat at the table. As she walked in, camera crews whispered among themselves. Some had covered her before. Others were new. But everyone knew they were witnessing something rare. A story that didn't burn out after a viral clip. A story that kept growing because its truth refused to die. She entered the chamber with her mother by her side, Colonel Veronica Blake standing in full uniform. Major Mia Cho walked just behind them, not as an escort, but as a quiet shield, an unbreakable presence. A reminder that service comes in many forms. Not all of them involve weapons. Some involve truth, and others involve the strength to stand when everyone expects you to sit down. Inside, Amara was handed a small microphone. Her hands were steady. Her voice didn't tremble. She began with a smile, soft but confident. Good morning. I'm here today not just for myself, but for the thousands of kids who don't get to be heard. Kids who get judged before they get seen. I was lucky. Cameras caught what happened to me. But what about the ones who never go viral? What about the ones no one believes? There was a pause, not a moment of silence, but a collective breath from everyone in the room. It was the kind of truth that forces reflection, even among the powerful. What happened to me was wrong, but what would have been worse was if I had stayed quiet, because silence protects the system. But voices? Voices can shake it. She continued for nearly 20 minutes. Her words weren't rehearsed, but they were deliberate. She didn't just speak about race. She spoke about dignity, about safety, about the right to exist without suspicion. She didn't demand pity. She demanded policy. By the time she finished, the room had shifted. Some lawmakers sat straighter. Others leaned in. A few even looked ashamed. But Amara didn't wait for validation. She stood, nodded once, and walked out. Outside, hundreds had gathered with signs that read, "Speak Loud, Amara, and Black Youth Matter." When she stepped down the marble steps, they didn't scream. They didn't chant. They just clapped. Long and loud, because sometimes the greatest sound in the world is recognition. Later that week, the president invited Amara to the White House, not for a photo op, but for a private conversation. No cameras, no press, just a girl who had changed the national conversation and a leader who wanted to listen. They talked for over an hour. When she left, Amara didn't say what was discussed, only that it gave her hope. And that, she said, was more powerful than any headline. In the months that followed, the ripple effect of her story became impossible to ignore. Schools across the country began adopting new anti-bias training programs. Police departments reevaluated their use of force policies, especially regarding minors. Social media platforms launched youth-led initiatives to spotlight stories like hers, giving a stage to the unseen. But perhaps the most beautiful moment came in a small community center back home. It was the last Friday of the year. The classroom smelled of cocoa and crayon wax. Dozens of little girls sat in mismatched chairs, holding notebooks and wide-eyed dreams. Amara stood at the whiteboard again. "They tried to silence me," she wrote slowly. Then she turned, smiled at them, and asked gently, "So what do we say?" And in unison, their voices rang out, "But we speak louder." She laughed, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. Not because she was sad, but because she saw the future standing right in front of her. That night, as the room emptied and the sun dipped below the horizon, Amara sat alone on the center bench. Her mother joined her quietly. "You proud of yourself?" Veronica asked softly. Amara tilted her head. "I'm proud of all of it, but mostly I'm proud I didn't run." Her mother placed a hand on hers. "That's the kind of courage that can't be taught. That's the kind that changes the world." And here's the truth I want to share with you, the listener, the viewer, the person sitting with their phone or screen in their hands. Amara's story isn't rare because it's dramatic. It's rare because it was seen, because someone chose to record, someone chose to share, someone chose to care. But there are millions more we'll never hear, unless we make space for them, unless we choose to see them. So next time you witness something that feels wrong, don't look away. Don't shrink into silence. Stand up, speak up, pull out your phone, use your voice, because one act of attention, one refusal to be silent, can start a fire that burns down centuries of injustice. And if you ever feel small, invisible, unheard, remember Amara Blake. Remember a girl who walked into a mall to buy a charger and walked out sparking a national movement. Remember that the loudest revolution doesn't always come from a crowd. Sometimes it comes from a 16-year-old girl who simply refuses to be quiet. She didn't set out to be a symbol. She just refused to be erased. And that, my friend, is how change begins.